What's up, YouTubers? Today we're going to talk about the Tactile Knife Company Rockwall. This is their first knife effort, and they're getting caught up with the backlog of them. And mine, which was ordered several months ago, has made its way through to me. Had a chance to spend some time with it, and man, is this thing cut. It is definitely a cutter. This knife is so named for Rockwall County in Texas. In fact, all of their knives are going to be named after counties in Texas. I consider this kind of a style piece. It's both functional and beautiful. If you take a look at that milling there on the scales itself, it's fantastic. And in fact, it's I'd be remiss if I didn't basically bring this into the mix as well. This is the same company that makes the Tactile Turns pens. And you might be able to, let me get this out of there. Yeah, I think you can see a little bit of the milling on. So you get this great little concentric circle texture on it that provides actually solid grip, and it's kind of classy. These are obviously just a little bit bigger in texturing. But the one thing that I would say is that this one kind of pairs very well. I'm not one to always get out like very finite measurements. But if you just take a look at the high end of this thing, that is 0.43, 0.42 inches across. Well, take a look at this knife, and sure enough, 0.42 across. So these are literally identical in terms of thickness. So that's just kind of an interesting fact about that. In terms of the knife, this particular knife sports a 3-inch blade of CTS XHP steel, which is a very good balanced steel. In my opinion, it has all the great balance points of sharpenability, edge retention, stainlessness. And then corrosion resistance. So it really one of those really good balanced steels. This thing I weighed in at 2.6 ounces, and it prices at $300. I do think that price is maybe a little bit high, but when you kind of understand the story a little bit, you also understand why. That they tried to make every single thing they could out on this knife from the United States. And I think other than the stop pin, you may have to check. There's some interviews with Michael Miller out there, who's kind of their community outreach, who will kind of explain that. But pretty much every single thing on here is either made in shop that they could, or bought from somewhere in the U.S.A, like the ceramic bearings. So yeah, this is definitely a great knife. Very fidgety. Very fidgety. Let's bring out some comparison knives at this point. I think in kind of this small range and in that price range, what you're talking about is, for me, the Pena X Series Trapper. This one is actually a 2.75 inch blade, so a little bit shorter, but you'll notice that very short blade, but very effective blade. This one goes in the $275 range. That is made by Reeve Knives, and it's very good. I would be remiss also if I didn't bring out the Benchmade Bug Ant, my full tie modified version. So again, these are titanium scales. Those I believe are made in Taiwan, but everything else is made in the United States. That's the 20CV version, and that one, as assembled, basically came in at just about $300. I think maybe in terms of a knife that I also kind of thought of a little bit is the Reeve Knives Small Sebenza. And other than this one having the taller hollow grind blade, definitely you're talking about that same size. The overlay comparison of these is very similar in terms of carry on there. Again, the texturing of here, I really like this titanium. I forget what it's a blasted titanium texturing, and it's great. But yeah, that's definitely a knife that I think kind of positions well against it. And then of course some natural comparisons are already out there, and that's of the Quiet Carry Waypoint. That's a little bit longer blade, 3.25 inches, but very similar titanium frame, very thin blade stock. This one's of course made out of the Van X clean steel. So that's $375 for the Reeve, and then the Waypoint is actually $300. So that's kind of the price range that you're talking about here, and what you might be looking at as far as some options. Jumping into the pros of this knife, I think the milling on it is fantastic. Again, not only the external milling, which makes it beautiful, the milling on the pivot, both sides, looks really nice. You have all sorts of milling to reduce weight on the inside there, even on the even on the clip side. This is really a knife that's super light at 2.6 ounces. Really appreciated that. And actually, one of the things I do want to show is, this is not really a comparison knife, but the milling, the one thing that really stood out in my mind is that the milling actually goes into the chamfering on around this blade, and that's very rare. Usually, and I'll show another sample of well, this is the A. Purvis Cirques. This is also a blade that I have that has that full cross hatching there. But if you look at it, and I do have several other knives that have that sort of milling, but what they do is they basically mill across, and then they come through with the chamfering, which cuts off any sort of that great pattern in there, so you don't ever get any of that, and you lose any of that texturing, which actually does provide some capability, some grip capability, and it's kind of a good feel, tactile meaning touch. So really do appreciate that, and I think that's extra special. You're not going to see that pretty much anywhere. Not a knife that I've had where it actually goes onto the chamfer or the chamfered edges there. So that's a great thing. This blade there's a lot to talk about here. Great stonewash finish, extremely close attention paid to the tip of this knife. I will say I was trying to get this thing to fail. We'll talk about the action in just a moment. And this tip is extremely sharp. It's not sharp in terms of that back swedge, but even in the reverse direction, it is so thin and slicey that will cut you, just literally rubbing against you in the reverse direction. It has a very nice grind. Also, they have a really good plunge here. If you take a look at that plunge line, you're going to get a lot of, really probably a lifetime of sharpenings out of this knife. And it's also kind of a very neutral blade with some flats and belly, and then that amazing tip. So this is the kind of knife that you can get to last a lifetime. The jimping is very positive on it. It's not super grippy, but it gives you just enough. You're busting through boxes or something like that, and it gives you just enough because it is such a very thin edge, or not edge, but a very thin blade stock, that you kind of appreciate that, having that there. And then the last thing I think is this one utilizes internal stop pins. So you'll notice there's no stop pins in there, and they're basically on the inside around there on the blade. So that just kind of adds a little extra touch of class there. The other thing on the pro side, the action of this is insane. I cannot get it to fail. That's actually how I cut myself, is trying with my other hand to hold it, and I was actually doing it with my left hand. And you can do anything you want. You can basically do the press, it straight push. You can do the light switch. This blade, I literally cannot get to fail. I try to go as slow and harmless as I can, and it still engages just enough. So the D10 is absolutely tuned in. So yeah, as far as action flipping, this is about as good as it gets for a flipper. Really, no problems there at all. On the con side, I will say this is not the most user maintenance friendly knife. I did speak with Michael Miller about it, and I do appreciate, he's the head of outreach, I think I mentioned, and he did explain, this knife they were trying to do to meet some very specific standards, and that was the small size. And to meet that small size, you kind of understand a little bit more. So it does not use caged bearings. They're actually uncaged bearings. They're 12 on each side. They're ceramic, again sourced in the USA though, and they run in a race. Both on the blade as well as on the scales. So I was able to maintenance this thing, but you just have to know about that before you do anything. And once you understand that, and you set up your workspace well enough, just watch out for those bearings if you happen to do it. I would suggest strongly against doing that with this particular knife. It also does have a free spinning pivot, so this is not like locked in with any sort of a notch or a D shape or anything like that. So you do have to hold a Torx T8 on the other side and then loosen it on either side. This is where the screw is, and then there's the receiver side. So just something to be aware of. On the whole, I don't think you're going to need to a whole lot, because you're probably not going to be doing this as a heavy use, knife, but it will pick up some pocket lint. I think in that particular context, it's probably going to be good enough, and that's what in the end, I wish I had probably just done, is just do the old blowing some alcohol, some compressed air, clean out the gunk, and then a couple drops of oil, and then it's back in action. For my particular case, I did have to do just the slightest bit of service, because there was the slightest bit of grit in there, And so that's the only reason that I even really opened it up. I am not Nick Shabazz here, and I do not seek to do that as my very first thing on a knife. Once I got rid of that though, reassembled it, it's been perfect, super smooth on the action, so that's a really good thing. And then the last thing I'd say on the con side is probably it's very left-hand friendly in terms of deployment. It's just that the pocket clip. The pocket clip is, I won't say integral, but it is integrated with the back spacer here, and so it's literally built in a way that can't switch over. And as well, if you take a look at the back spacer screws here, they actually go into the other side scale, so it's not as though it was built in with let's say receiver nuts or Chicago nuts, something like that. So I think maybe that would be a design option that would be a good thing, is if they did do that, and maybe centered a little bit. I do like the lines of it. The bill is a little bit low on that as well, but it's not lower than some other knives that I have. It's just, this does not go over very easily on like some really thick jeans. So that's kind of the con side. Overall, kind of like the company really, I think, feels and understands about it themselves, is this really is Tactile Knife 1.0. It's a very good effort. It's definitely a very classy knife. It does pair, obviously, very well, with their other products, the Tactile Turn pens. And it's a great first effort. I did talk to them a little bit further about future efforts, and they do have a thumb stud knife that's going to have cage bearings, a D-shaped pivot, as well as, with thumb studs and D-shaped pivot. So they've learned from these. They're going to work around that. Still, is it a great knife? Yes. Definitely this is going to be one of those I'm going to be wearing it, for classy occasions. It obviously is. It's fantastic in that context. $300 might be a little high price, but, to help them out, I think about some of the other knives that I've seen kind of first runs. I think about the Hinder MP1, and that was whatever, $500 or $425 for something that dropped that really, it had some problems too, and even kind of went away. So this is a great first effort. Really appreciate it. Hope you did enjoy this, and have a great day. Take care now.